The last 5 champs in reverse order are the Nuggets, the Warriors, the Bucks, the Lakers, and the Raptors. So I decided to do a little exercise. If this streak is going to extend to 6, if we're going to get another team this year that has not won in the last 5, if this is going to be, the parity is going to continue, who's that champion going to be? Which team is going to win this year that is not one of the 5 teams I just named on my list? I have my top 5 contenders.
Number 5.
Cam, at 5, I'm putting your Philadelphia 76ers. And the reason is, look, if you've got Embiid, you've got a puncher's chance. You can't discount the possibility. Now, their performance, the way they went out in the fourth quarter of that game 6 at home, and then their total no-show in the second half against Boston, if I'm them, I'm moving on from James Harden. I'm trying to find a way to continue to build around Embiid. The coaching change they made, look, Nick Nurse is a championship-level coach, and I think everyone is very high on him. So let's see what he's able to bring that's a little bit different. I think if you have Embiid, then you have a chance. I love Tyrese Maxey. They've got some pieces. I think that you have to put the Sixers in the conversation. Do I expect it? No. Would I bet on it? Certainly not. But I don't think you can make a list of 5 teams and not put them on it.
Number 4.
Same has to be said for the Phoenix Suns. If you've got Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, you've got a chance. Now, I don't know what's going to wind up happening with Chris Paul there. I don't know what's going to wind up happening with DeAndre Ayton there. And frankly, I wouldn't be at all surprised if both Booker and Durant wind up out of there in the next couple of years. If I had to bet on this, I would bet on this going badly, not well. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the teams that have the best chance to do it. And if you have those 2 guys on the roster, it's impossible to overlook their chances of it coming together great. You put together a few little pieces around those 2, I certainly have nothing but belief in both of them. So I think they have to be on the list. I have them at 4.
Number 3.
I have Sacramento at 3, although I will grant I believe it is a year early. I think the Kings are going to be really good. I think that this was a magnificent experience for them. And I hope that they are able to not do what the Grizzlies did. The Grizzlies look like the next up-and-coming young team, but they, I think, have imploded around the issues surrounding their superstar, Ja Morant. I think that will be something from which they are not able to recover. Sacramento hopefully doesn't have any of that stuff. They have terrific players. De'Aaron Fox is a stud. Domantas Sabonis is a much better player than people realize for the most part. They got pieces. They got a really good coach. They got a great taste of it up against a dynastic champion this year than with 7 games against the Warriors. I think it's a year early. If you ask me right now, do I think the Kings win it next year? No. Do I think they have a really good chance, though, as currently constituted, to win one in the next few? I do. But that leaves us the big 2.
Number 2.
Miami is 2, and that is not because they were just in the finals, but because I think the Heat culture has become something that other players around the league want to be a part of. I think it became so evident this year, the way those guys play, the style they play, the work they do, the way they are coached. I think they've gone from the team that superstars didn't want to be associated with to the team that they will be. The end of the LeBron thing, I think, did not sit well, and the way the Dwayne Wade thing ended, I don't think sat well. I think a lot of big stars around the league didn't like the feel of that. But I feel like that has mostly passed now. And so I believe Miami is going to add a huge piece. Could it be Damian Lillard? Could it be Bradley Beal? If they add one of those 2 guys, and that's why I'm putting them so high on this list, because I believe they will. If and when they add one of those 2 guys, then I think they become on the short list of favorites to win the championship regardless of who else we're talking about. And I saved number 1 for now.
Number 1.
And to me, it feels fairly self-evident that it's the Boston Celtics. I still can't believe they weren't in the finals this year. I still can't believe they didn't win that Game 7 at home. I still haven't figured out just what element it is from that team that is missing for them to finally get over the top, but I believe they are the likeliest team to do it. Wendy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so are they actually, because they've had so much success in the playoffs the last few years, and the fact that they haven't been able to get there is extraordinarily frustrating. Having covered them extensively, I'm not a fan of the Boston Celtics, but if I were a fan, I'd be bashing my head into the wall repeatedly at the way that team sometimes plays. There's no doubt that they would be at the top of that list. And it's no offense to the Miami Heat. They absolutely have were brilliant in these playoffs. I long for the idea, had the Bucks played the Nuggets in the finals, I think we'd still be on the road with the finals right now, because I think the Giannis Jokic match and the Drew Holiday Jamal Murray match gave a better fighting chance against the power that is the Nuggets. And you could argue that it could have happened in 2021, Greeny, and that was the year that the Nuggets made the Aaron Gordon trade and were looking awesome, and then Jamal Murray tore his ACL. That Nuggets team could have made the finals that year. So in my mind, we're 0 for 2 in potentially seeing what may be two of the best teams in the league facing off in the finals, in the Nuggets and the Bucks. So you don't have the Bucks there, I know, because they won in 2021. The other team I'm just going to mention is the Suns. The Suns were the only team that laid a glove really on the Nuggets in this postseason. They obviously are a team that needs to be built out, but they have the hardest part, the 2-star players. And I know that it's, people would say, well, how do you, they only have a couple of guys on their roster. How do they build that out? And I would just say, as I told you this morning on Get Up, that 4 of the 8 guys that the Nuggets used in their rotation, they acquired last offseason. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Bruce Brown, Christian Brown, and Jeff Green. All for those 4 of those guys were not Nuggets 1 year ago today. They made those moves to supplement the star players they had on the roster. They were smart and they were shrewd. None of them were particularly expensive, and it ended up being a championship team. The Suns, with smart management, can build out their roster around those 2 guys going into next year.
I agree with that. I've just gotten burned on Durant too many times now. I picked the Nets to go to the finals 2 years ago, and they got swept in the first round. I picked Phoenix to make the finals this year, and they got knocked out as they did. And too many things can go wrong. There's just, what someone said I forget who it was that said this to me somewhere on the road. Wasn't Woj. I forget who said it. But someday the 30 for 30 on the summer of 2019 is going to be one of the great 30 for 30s all time. When Paul George and Kawhi went to the Clippers and KD and Kyrie went to the Nets, what we all expected those teams to become and what has actually happened, that's going to make a great 30 for 30.
Greeny, Kyrie's greatest accomplishment is hitting the 3 in the 2016 Game 7. Mm-hmm. His second greatest accomplishment is getting Durant to come with him to Brooklyn that summer. I still, to this day, I didn't understand it in 19. I don't understand it 4 years later. Not just because of teaming up with Kyrie, but the other options that were there, which, by the way, included just staying put, recovering from the torn Achilles in Golden State and coming back with that team, which then had a mandate. They had lost the finals. He could have gone to L.A. and joined LeBron. By the way, Greeny, Kawhi reached out to him before he went to go to Paul George. He said, hey, what about playing with me with the Clippers? All of those things were on the table. He could have gone to Boston. Boston almost landed him when he chose to go to Golden State. They sort of finished second. Look at that Boston team. They'd still have those guys. And Kyrie was leaving Boston. He could have gone in and filled that role. He ended up replacing him with Kemba Walker. Imagine if that was Kevin Durant. All of those things were on the board, and he chose Brooklyn and Kyrie. I'm still fascinated by that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. So since we got here, and I didn't mean to get here, but we're here, what is going to happen with Kyrie now? We saw him, with much fanfare at the Laker game, that last game before they got eliminated, and we all wondered. And then, there's all this stuff going on with him, as there always is. When push comes to shove, where's he going to be this fall?
So let me qualify this saying by my feel right now, or most likely, because new information is always developing. But the reading I have from the conversations I have is that I think he's probably going to stay in Dallas. And the challenge will be, what's the contract? How many years? What's the contract? Do you give him full max? If you give him full max, do you give it to him for short years? But the thing about it is, like, if Kyrie says, I want to prioritize winning a championship, I would say, but your actions last year didn't lead me to believe that, because the Nets were playing awesome basketball. Kyrie was playing well, and he couldn't get the contract extension he wanted, and he pulled the ripcord and said, get me out of there. And so, people would say to me, well, look at the Lakers. Yeah, I think that LeBron and Kyrie would be an amazing fit together. But that would require Kyrie to really sacrifice probably on the money. And that was not the stance that he took last season. So when it comes to Kyrie especially, I'm always going to favor actions over words, and his actions are that he wants to be taken care of in this contract, and Dallas is the place that can do that.
Lillard goes on Brian Custer's podcast and says, hey, if I'm dealt, I want to go to Miami. Does the league expect Damian Lillard to be traded? And I will put in as my caveat, that's the reason I put Miami at number 2 on my list, because it sounds to me like they're very much going to be in the running to land one more really good player, and if they got that, that would give them a really good chance.
I don't think today, I have no vibe at all that there's an interest from Lillard to ask out now, or the interest in the Blazers for trading him. Let's see how the draft and free agency goes, because he was very clear that he wanted the Blazers to make moves to help him now. And I'm not sure drafting a 19-year-old, even if it's a high upside 19-year-old like Scoot Henderson fits. So, but right now I would say I'm not getting any vibe on a trade at all.
Okay, so you think there's a real possibility that they draft third, they take someone like Scoot Henderson, and they have him and Damian Lillard both on the team next year?
I know that that's not what it sounded like they wanted, but if that happens, I think let's check back in. But I think that might be the direction they might be headed right now.
Okay, so there's that. And then there's Bradley Beal. What should we be expecting from him in and out of Washington?
So Bradley Beal, I know he's been in trade rumors for years. This is a different situation. He is on a team that is openly talking about the possibility of rebuilding. That is not what he signed up for a year ago. That's number one. Number two, Greeny, he has this clause in his contract that's a no-trade clause, which not only means he can decide where he gets traded, but what he gets traded for. And so if the Wizards elect to start a rebuild, and Brad does no longer want to be a part of that, and okays a trade, I think people will be stunned at how little he might go for, because the problem is, if he's only played 90 games total the last 2 years, he's not played a ton more games than Zion, quite frankly. And if you look at the fact that no trade clause travels with him to wherever he goes, and that he's making $50 million a year on average, I'm not so sure it's a super attractive contract, even though he is such a good player when he's healthy. So that's the team. That's the guy who could end up being a real balance of power move. I know that last summer our jaws dropped when Gobert and Donovan Mitchell got traded for all of those draft picks and assets and players. I think you would see the inverse. People's jaws would drop if Bradley Beal gets traded, and how little he gets traded for because of the control he has.
Okay, so that's an interesting one to watch. And then finally, the Zion one. This thing has got to come to a head at some point in New Orleans, and just with the league in general. You just can't be as good as he is and get paid as much as he does and be as unavailable as he is forever. Something has to come to a head. So what is it? What's going to happen with him this offseason?
Greeny, I'm just so skeptical at this, how fastly, widely available it has gotten out that the Pelicans want to move up in the draft. I've been around too long, and when I see something like that, it smells like a smokescreen or a diversionary tactic, or even like a negotiating or positioning tactic. But that said, it is out there, not quietly, that the Pelicans are interested in moving up from the 14th pick, and that they'd love to get into that top 3 or top 4. And the only ways to do that really are to trade Zion or trade Brandon Ingram. And Ingram is such a core player of what they do. I can't rule it out, but the feel is maybe Zion could become available in the next week. So the league is watching it. I think it's an extraordinary risk to trade a player of that talent level. The only way you would do it is if you were compelled by what you could get back in return. But obviously, you don't have to be an insider to see that things haven't gone well there. And the fact that this is a discussion, even if it doesn't turn out to be anything, I think is an indication of where it is with Zion and the Pelicans.
Wendy, you were the best. I really enjoyed seeing you on the road, and I hope that we'll keep this going up here, at least through the draft and free agency and a whole lot more. We'll talk soon. Thank you, Win, man.
Very good. Take care.
I love the guy. Brian Windhorst is just terrific. And that Zion Williamson stuff is really interesting to me, Cam and Bob, if I could bring you in on this. At some point, he becomes a problem that you would love someone else to have to deal with. I don't know exactly what the right thing to say is about Zion, but I think it is unquestionable. Well, the facts as we know them are, he's unavailable far too often. His conditioning does not seem to be that of the absolute apex. He does not seem to take care of his body in the ways that we see a lot of the very best players in the sport do, which is always a problem. But in his particular case, because of his frame, because of the way he is just naturally built, the way he is made, it is a particular problem. I think that at some point you have to look at that and say, the ends are not justifying the means. And if I can turn this into someone else's problem, I do it.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.